included nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, and they make up, as has been mentioned, about a third of all awardees. Funding for prime care in fiscal year 16, for example, the program awarded 6 applicants, including 2 physicians, a nurse practitioner, and 3 physician's assistants. But in 2017, in that award cycle, the current award cycle for which we're making awards, the prime care program changed funding strategies to award more applicants. And so this new strategy tiers the way we allocate funds to those various health professionals. So in fiscal year 17, prime care funded 12 applicants, using both the new strategy as well as some expanded funding that we received through one-time sources. Recipients included 1 physician, 5 dentists, a psychologist, a physician assistant, a nurse practitioner, 2 registered dental hygienists, and 1 licensed social worker. Geographically, this year's awardees are providing care in counties ranging from Buena Vista to Scott, from Lee to Lucas to Webster County. Since the year 2000, Iowans have made in excess of 500,000 visits to prime care providers, enabling them to receive services in healthcare areas that would otherwise be short providers. The prime care program serves populations in greatest need of care in a manner which distributes assistance fairly and equitably. Governor and Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much for your support for the important work that the department performs on behalf of access to care for Iowans.
Gary, thank you very much. We'll answer your questions right now.
It was some one-time allocation of funding from the federal government that may or may not continue. The difference was about $200,000. So the amount of money that increased from $280,000 to $480,000.
Other questions on this subject? I would point out that having access to quality health care is important for economic development in rural Iowa. So this is something that we've been working on for a long time, but programs like this help make it possible for us to have quality health care throughout the state. And that is one of the factors that helps attract business and jobs. Yes.
I've got a question, Governor, about the bill signing. You know, we were told that this wasn't a public bill.
Well, let me just a second. Is there more questions on this subject first, then I'll come back to you.
How do you define underserved areas? I mentioned Scott County. That seems like, probably seems to fit the bill as an underserved area.
Yeah, all the counties you listed to Farnborough all seem like big places.
Right. So there are rural counties that are in shortage, but then there are also urban counties as well that have shortages of healthcare providers, particularly in areas where you've got low-income clients. So we've got community health centers, for example, in the state of Iowa that are providing services in urban areas predominantly. And so there are shortages without regard to urban or rural status.
So it's not just geographic.
Correct. The shortage areas are identified geographically, but primarily it's based on the number of population, the population to physician ratio or the population to dentist ratio. If those ratios are too high, then you would qualify as a federally designated shortage area.
Also, there's a map, I think.
Yeah,
You're showing us the map. Yeah. Lieutenant Governor and I have seen the map, and it's scattered throughout the state. I think. Any other questions on this, and we'll go back to your question, okay?
Okay, so my question was, Governor, we inquired whether this was going to be a public bill signing, told that it wasn't, because I wanted to attend it, and then we ended up getting a picture showing you signing it, but then Drew Klein tweets out a picture saying he was there with you at the bill signing, and of course the Democrats are saying, hey, this just goes and shows that the governor was bought and the Republicans were bought and paid for by American Prosperity and the Koch brothers. So what's going on? Why wasn't this open to the public? Why was Drew Klein and Americans for Prosperity there?
Well, we had a few people that made a specific request to be able to witness the bill signing, including a lot of the staff people that had helped work on it. And so we accommodated that. But as you know,
We asked to be at it as well.
well, it wasn't a public bill signing. And like primarily staff.
Can you
That,
give us a list of the people who were there?
well, I don't know specifically.
Give me a list of the people who were there.
It, yeah, right.
There was
It,
no-
it, it wasn't a formal bill signing. I actually just signed the bill, I signed it with a number of pens to give to legislators that wanted to have one of the pens that was used in the bill signing. And there were a few other people that asked to be there, and that was it.
How many lobbyists were there?
There weren't, I don't know, there may have been just a few. I
Who
don't,
were the other lobbyists? besides-
I don't know who's a lobbyist, to tell you the truth.
Well, can you tell us who was there? You don't know who was there, Governor?
Well, I can tell you it was primarily staff that was there. And there were a few other people, and maybe my staff can put together a list of who else was there, but it wasn't a big thing as far as that goes.
I just had a question. Who shot the photo? Was that the governor's office photo?
I imagine it was, yeah.
Can we get a copy of it?
Well, it was in your paper.
No, we had the one with you signing it, but we didn't have the one with Drew Klein that everybody was.
Oh,
tweeting at.
well, here's the thing. After the bill had been signed, and my staff, I think, did take a picture of me signing the bill, there were some people that wanted to have a picture with me. Well, I accommodate pictures. In fact, I've been to Chinese New Year. I've had my picture taken with more Chinese Americans probably than you can imagine. But I try to be very accommodating with people. And so there were some people that wanted a picture with me. And so I accommodated that. That's not all the time.
Mr. Klein was one of only a very small handful of people that appeared at the Capitol when they were the bill relative to the hundreds of others who did. Doesn't that just add to the rancor of it as to have a picture out there?
I have pictures with just about anybody that wants their picture. So if anybody wants to come in and get a picture with me, I'm pretty accommodating. I have my picture taken with thousands of people at the state fair, at the Chinese New Year. Kids come up to me all the time, school kids, and do selfies and group pictures with all kinds of groups. We just had STEM Day and had a picture with a whole lot of people with that. So I just try to be very accommodating to people that want their picture with me. There's nothing special about that. In fact, some people have pictures of me when they were little, and now they want a picture today. So they have a picture when they were a baby, and now they want a picture with me today. So,
Are you worried about the message?
no, I'm not, because like I say, I'm very open and accessible to people, and I try to meet with all kinds of people.
Well, why was he there, the guy from American Prosperity? Why wasn't Danny Holman?
He didn't ask, I guess.
If Holman would have asked, you would have allowed him.
Well, first of all, I said, we accommodated those people that asked. Well, it wasn't a public bill signing, but we did have some people that had been supporters of the bill that wanted to see it. So we said, okay.
You accommodated them, but didn't accommodate the media.
Okay, listen, I'm accommodating the meeting right now. I meet with you guys every week. So I'm just telling you, I try to be very open and accessible. I have my picture taken with a lot of people. I sign a lot of bills.
But Governor, how do you decide what is, I think people want to know if this is such a big deal, why was it a private deal? You do.
It wasn't a big deal as far as I was concerned.
About the change in the law, was it a big deal?
Well, I think it's something we worked for a long time, and something that I felt was needed, and we worked with House and Senate to approve it. But I also had a busy schedule. I mean, I was in Bondurant for Home Base Iowa in the morning, and then I was in Pleasant Hill for Home Base Iowa. I got back from that. My staff had reviewed the bill. I had an opportunity to spend some time reviewing it and then signed it.
But also had time to make sure that you're fine.
I didn't have anything to do with that. I mean, he, I guess, was one of the few people that made a request to be present. And I really don't even know him. So it's not that big a deal as far as I'm concerned.
Can you talk about the outside money influence that was talked about during the debate on the collective bargaining bill?
Well, here's the thing that I think is interesting. The organized groups that spent the most money lost. They're not happy. I understand that. They've had their way for decades, but we had an archaic law that we felt needed to be amended in order to be more fair and balanced, and including such things as healthcare. Back in the 1970s, 1974, when this law was passed, healthcare wasn't that expensive. And a lot of private sector businesses, as a fringe benefit, paid 100% of the cost of healthcare for the employees. That's changed decades ago. But yet, under our archaic collective bargaining law, and I've tried and tried and tried again over all these years to get it changed, and the unions have refused to budge until this last time. They finally agreed, instead of paying $0, to pay $20 a month. But the taxpayers for a family plan for unionized employees are paying over $23,000. That's not fair. And I've had people all over the state that have told me this is not fair, it's not right, it needs to change, and this is a way that we could do it.
Governor, there's limited information in the new law about what that healthcare system may look like. Do you expect additional legislation or?
No. We intend to work with the employees. We intend to work with the healthcare providers, and we intend to put together a competitive healthcare system. I would point out what we've already done for non-contract employees. Non-contract employees, like the Lieutenant Governor and I, have been contributing towards our healthcare for some time.
There's a reference in the bill to a 30 days notice that references, it kind of looks like a placeholder for potential additional legislation. That's what I'm specifically
No,
curious.
we're not looking at additional legislation. There is no need for additional legislation. Specifically, it's not under the new law subject to bargaining. But we want to work together. And I have tried to do this for years and years and years. It's the unions that have refused to work with us. I will say, with the exception of the SPOC union that represents the public safety people, they have agreed to make a contribution towards their health care. And that's what we wanted everybody to do. But we haven't been able to get that done under the old law. We will be able to do that under the new law.
Do you think police officers at the university should be public safety? Classified.
No, I'm not going to get into that. I think the legislature basically made the decision on what would qualify under one definition of public safety. It doesn't really matter who's members of what or whatever. We want to treat people fairly, and we appreciate the public safety officials that have worked with us, that have been contributing to their health care. We appreciate the non-contract employees, and now the contract employees will also be expected to. But the savings that we get from going to what I think can be a much bigger unit, spreading the risk, and having people have some skin in the game by contributing to it, means more money will be available for salaries in the future. Good example is what's happened in Wisconsin. Okay, in Wisconsin 6 years ago, and they went through all kinds of, a lot tougher situation than we had. And they made, you might say, more significant changes than we did. But despite all the threats, the occupation of the Capitol, the intimidation, and all of that sort of stuff, Governor Walker not only survived a recall, he won by a bigger margin, and has won again. Republicans in the legislature have been reelected and increased their margins. The actions they've taken have been upheld by the courts, and now Governor Walker is proposing a reform bonus that provides more money for schools. Contrast that with Illinois, where the public employee unions control everything, lock, stock, and barrel. And listen to me. And Illinois has the worst unfunded pension system. They have the most state and local debt per capita, and they have not passed a budget in the last 2 years. So do you want to be like Illinois or Wisconsin? I think Wisconsin's a better example of doing the right thing.
Senator, this bill was signed within less than 2 weeks of it being introduced to the public. Is this the new setup for the rest of the session? There's a lot of other legislation that's a priority for Republicans. Do we expect to see a bill drop on a Tuesday and it be signed within a week and a half?
Well, first of all, I want to compliment the legislature. Unlike when the Democrats controlled it, they followed the rules and they did things according to the rules. I know the Senate stayed all night, debated this bill all night. And you're also aware that we have something called the funnel system, which puts deadlines on. So now the legislature has to move quickly to meet the deadlines for those bills that are not, that are subject to the funnel limitation. So I think you will see things moving quickly. Bills that have been introduced now, of course, to meet the deadlines will have to be out of committee one side or the other.
You said, your staff said that the next meeting, you would be carefully reviewing the bill. Really within an hour or two it was signed. What was?
No, we got it the night before, and my staff did review it very carefully. I had other responsibilities, but I was aware of the basic contents of that bill through the entire session, and Larry Johnson assured me that he had gone through it.
Governor,
Did you feel
Governor,
some urgency to sign it because of the what's going on with contract negotiations around the state?
Well, first of all, I'm very familiar with all of that. And I would point out the state made its final offer to AFSCME on Friday. So we are continuing to negotiate in good faith.
In 2011, you said that you thought it would be a good idea to allow younger workers in Ivers to have a 401k-like retirement system 6 years later. Is that something you want to sign before you leave for retirement?
No, it's not something that can be done that quickly. I would point out that, first of all, we don't want to make any change that would impact the benefits of those people under the public employee retirement system. And I would point out it's never been subject to collective bargaining. So the public employee collective bargaining system has never affected IPERS or the retirement system. And so it's not affected by this legislation whatsoever. I think it would make sense to have a long-range study that would look at moving to a defined contribution as opposed to a defined benefit system, as a lot of companies in Iowa have already done. Companies like Principal and John Deere and Mid-America Energy have done that. However, and if you're going to do that, it's a long-term commitment, and I think you have to look at maybe even a hybrid system over the period of adjustment. So a number of other states or communities are looking at that. The states that haven't, or the communities that haven't, well, you're familiar with Detroit, some of the cities in California and whatever gone bankrupt because, and Illinois is a great example of this. I point this out, why they have the worst unfunded pension system in the country, because the public employee unions have controlled it and they've never let them make the reforms that are needed.
Governor, back here first. Senator Hogue has said that what's happened this past week, the collective bargaining, poison the well for the rest of the session, destroy any effort to have bipartisanship. How about that?
Well, I sure hope that he reconsiders, because there's a lot of things we need to work together on. We just had a press conference this past week about distracted driving. And that's something that has broad bipartisan support. Law enforcement supports it. We had victims, family members that were here, and we shouldn't have a disagreement on one issue prevent us from working together on other issues. I've always taken the position that the person that might be your biggest adversary on one issue can be your best ally on the next. So I would hope that Mr. Hoag would reconsider and decide not to have his feelings about this one issue prevent him from working with me and working with Republicans on many other important issues for the people of the state. Protecting the safety of our citizens on our highways is very, very important. And that is certainly an area that we deserve bipartisan support.
Question in the back, Joyce, Barbara, then we're gonna go. Republicans didn't campaign on the collective bargaining.
Oh, yes, they did. And the Democrats campaigned against Republicans on that issue. I remember Branstad making that a big issue. And the Democrats lost 6 Senate seats. And I think this tells you why Iowans were tired of Mr. Branstad blocking consideration of this. One of the most egregious things that is addressed in this issue is when you have an employee that commits a serious violation of someone's rights, harming another person, and that person then is eventually dismissed, but that is all kept confidential. And the result of that, because that personnel information is kept confidential, the House, by the way, did pass a bill to make that public in 2013, but it was Senator Branstad and some of the Senate Democrats that prevented it from being debated. That is part of the legislation that was approved. Another part of it that is important to me is a lame duck governor cannot just accept a union's demands without any negotiations, as Culver did, and stuck us with a contract that lasted for 2 years when I came in, when the lieutenant governor and I came in 2011. Those kind of things are unfair and unjust and needed to be corrected. And I commend the legislature for having the courage to do it.
On the distracted driving, they're looking at your bill today, and it's arguing that it toughens penalties for causing a serious accident if you've got a handheld device, and then it does a sobriety program. Is that it? Is that all your recommendations? Because initially you had said bicycles were important too.
Well, there's public safety has a number of other things that we endorse. So that is just one piece of legislation. But the Department of Public Safety and Governor's Highway Safety Traffic Bureau had a whole task force that looked at this and made a number of recommendations. And if you go back and read my condition of the state address, I basically indicated that I thought there were a lot of good ideas there, and I hope the legislature would take significant action.
Governor, at the beginning of the legislative session, I asked you what you'd like to sign before you left for China, and you said collective bargaining.
Yep.
My notes are in my head are correct. Now that that's done with, what are you still hoping to sign before you leave?
Well, there's a lot of things that we want to do. I sit.
Specific, any tips there, any additional information?
Well, first of all, I want to leave the state in a good financial position. And that means in this difficult time, we have to make some tough decisions. And we've already done that. I would like to see, and I don't know if I'll get the opportunity to do this yet, but we've already seen the legislature for the first time in many years approve supplemental state aid within the first 30 days of the session for the first year. I would like them to do the second year. And I understand that the legislature wanted to wait until they saw the March revenue estimates before making that decision. But March is not that far away. And once we have the March revenue estimate, I hope that we can work that out as well and approve so schools will know not only what they're going to get in supplemental state aid for the next fiscal year, but for the year after that. And there's a number of other things too to improve Iowa's competitiveness for creating jobs and growing the Iowa economy that I want to approve. And many of those are in the area of making Iowa more competitive in terms of tax and regulatory items.
Is that tax cuts has that changed?
Well, it's again, the lieutenant governor is ready to take over whenever the time comes that I'm confirmed and that I resign. And so I think it'll be a very smooth transition. I think we share the same priorities in terms of these things. So, as I said, I don't know. The legislature may be done before I get the opportunity to leave, or they may not. And if that's the case. But I'll work hard and stay focused on my responsibilities here every day until I'm confirmed.
Thank you.